Resilience Practitioner Training from collegeofwellbeing.com. I want to throw in a second thought experiment, and this is one that I'd really love you to take away from this webinar, that every time you find yourself in a situation that's difficult, frustrating, challenging or annoying, is to see this as part of your training. The challenge is to use these times as opportunities to practice applying resilience tools, and I'm going to be talking a bit more about that, what I mean by that, and some tools that I use a lot whenever I run into something difficult. I say to myself, Chris, advanced training, and particularly if it's something very difficult, advanced resilience training. It's a phrase I say to myself, and what that does is it provokes me to rise to the challenge, and that's what turns a red zone into an orange zone. That when we're in that red zone over the edge, that if we can rise to that challenge and say, okay, advanced resilience training, how am I going to deal with this? And so I'd like to look at some different ways of dealing with challenges when we're over that edge into the red zone. And I use an acronym called CTOPS. CTOPS, each letter there stands for a different area where practices can help resilience grow. I think of each one as a skill set, a set of skills that help resilience grow. There are different ways of building resilience, and I'd like to start with the first of those, the S, and the S stands for storyboarding. And when I teach the 7-module course, that first S of storyboarding, I see that as the starting point, and it is a core practice. And what I do is I ask myself the question, what would a story of resilience look like here? And in terms of that thing about what would a story of resilience look like here, I use templates, but I find very helpful the example of I worked years ago with a sleep specialist, and she taught me a treatment for recurrent nightmares. When she'd see people who dread going to bed because they'd have the same nightmare again and again, what she'd say to them is say, well, okay, in the waking state, go back into your nightmare and see if you can change the ending. So your conscious waking state, close your eyes, imagine yourself in that nightmare again, and think of a different way the story can go. Think of it, if you can find a way of moving to a better ending to the nightmare, then when you're in the nightmare again, you can think, oh, I know how this one goes. That there's a way of leading to a better outcome here. And so that's an example of a two-part story. There's what happens, the difficult bit, the nightmare, and then there's what happens next, which in this case is finding a different ending. And I'm inviting you to, any time that you're facing something difficult, just to say to yourself, there's what happens, and then there's what happens next. And that's a very simple two-part storyboard, really, in a way, where you can say, well, here's me facing this, whatever it is, whether it's problems with the internet or something difficult in your working life or personal life. See that as the first part of the story. And resilience is saying, okay, well, what happens next? If we're going to do resilience, the second part of the story involves your response. It involves you, I think of it as finding the upslope if there's a dip. And so that's what we're going to be looking at. What helps is, I use other templates for storyboarding. I use a 4-part template and a 6-part template. But I find here, just to introduce the idea, just this simple 2-part structure. When you face something difficult, see that as part 1. Then part 2 is really about your response. And so then we're going to use the other ways of the CTOPS. And the E stands for emotional first aid. Resilience Practitioner Training from collegeofwellbeing.com can help if you'd like to be gaining practices to use or that you can pass on.